Okay. So for those of you who are joining, I'm just waiting for my co-host to join. So please bear with us for just a moment. I'm so excited to be talking about this with everybody. And don't forget that we're going to be doing a live question and answer session. So as soon as Brad joins, we'll go ahead and get that going as well. Let's see here. Oh, there he is. We're going to invite him now. Hello.
Hello. It worked.
It worked. Fantastic. Well, a whole bunch of people have joined, which is fantastic. So that's very exciting. Can you see everything on your end?
I can see you. I can see that there's people that have joined on my link.
Beautiful.
I don't know that I can see yours, but I do see a lot of people who are joining down below as well. So yeah, I guess so.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
We are thrilled to have you here. This is, I guess, this is our officially first TikTok Live luncheon. We have done another, The Right Stuff, about a month ago, and we plan to do these monthly. So very excited about it. I've got all my notes. I got all my screens are active. And
Awesome. I'm glad. I have to sit separate from my computer, so I have my notepad. I'm traditional today.
All right, very good. Well, so the topic today is going to be something that you might have heard a little bit about, maybe just a little bit if you've been alive on planet Earth, and that is artificial intelligence and particularly how we can use it as writers and authors.
Exactly.
And in our marketing and all that as well. It's exciting to explore this conversation with you. Maybe we should start, though, by giving you the opportunity, Olivia, to introduce yourself, give you a little bit of your backstory of, how you ended up here, and I'll do the same, and then we can go from there.
Definitely. So my name is Olivia Savard. All of my followers would know me from the Light of the Moon Inc. page. We are a company that helps independent authors self-publish. So we're deeply rooted in transparent and empowered publishing. I run the business with my mom, so it's a family operation. And through TikTok, was able to connect with Brad, and we've had this beautiful collaboration since. We can go into it in a little bit more detail. Maybe I wasn't sure if you wanted to jump straight into the whole history, but
well, let's not start with day one, but yeah, a little bit of history. Yeah.
Sure. So I specialize in social media marketing and promotion, digital advertising. I have a social media business of my own, and then also work with independent authors on promoting their work, especially through Light of the Moon Inc. And Brad, how about you?
Well, I am known both on TikTok and around the world as the Write, W-R-I-T-E, the Write on Purpose coach. I have been a professional writer for about 30 years, 30 to 32 years, something like that. I was an avid reader long before that. There's two pivotal points that I always like to share about how I became a writer and working on my 31st book. One was going back, not to day one, but pretty close to fourth grade, when I moved with my family to Raleigh, North Carolina, and lucky for us, started living next door to a children's librarian who introduced me in that fourth grade summer to the joy of reading for pleasure, which I was not an avid reader before that, and have been ever since then. So thank you, wherever you are, Mrs. Crabtree, for introducing me to the joys of reading. And the next pivotal point was I followed the path of becoming a small animal veterinarian, which is something I'd wanted to do since I was 7. But in the midst of that, I, in the I guess, early 80s, purchased one of the first 1,000 Macintosh computers on a very spontaneous purchase on one weekend. I saw it, loved it, took out a new credit card so I could pay for it. And by Monday was having buyer's remorse. What in the world did I do? How am I going to pay for this thing? And discovered that it has a pretty nice writing program, which is basically all it did. It was a word processor and a Mech Paint that you couldn't do anything with. And so I said, well, I've talked about for years, as many of my clients talk about, one day, someday, I want to start writing. So I said, okay, well, maybe this is the day. Maybe this is the signal. This is how I can pay for this darn thing. And sent off an article, 10 ways and 10 reasons to spay your cat. About a month later, got a $50 check back. And it's like, yoo-hoo, I'm off and running. And pretty much have been ever since then. So, and now besides writing professionally, I write books, primarily eco-fantasy books for kids, young adults, and adults. But I also maintain a small boutique, I would call it, coaching firm called Write on Purpose Coaching, where I assist aspiring authors and new authors to express themselves purposefully, passionately through the mode of writing itself. So that's what got me here on TikTok.
Fantastic. Just a couple of quick shout outs. I think user Cardboard Box has been liking the live quite a bit, so a big thank you to them. And Spider Egg joined, so we'll say hello back. At the moment, I haven't seen any questions coming through, but I also got a little bit distracted through our conversation. But it looks like everybody has just been either a join or a like, so we're good there.
Yeah, and if you do have questions, we just froze. One of us did.
Oh,
if you do have questions, post them. We'll try to keep calling it, and if we don't respond to the question, if you do have questions, post them. We'll try to keep calling it, and if we don't respond to the question, if you do have questions, post them. We'll try to keep calling it, and if we don't respond to the question. What is happening? Can I leave and come back? All right. Invite me back and we'll see if we can get this technical issue handled. Invite me back and we'll see if we can get this technical issue.
okay. So that was very interesting. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced that before. But hello to everybody who's joined. I'm going to give Brad just a second to jump back in. I don't know if you guys caught that, but his audio kept repeating and repeating and repeating until it turned into an audio mush. So let's see if he's back. Nope, not quite yet. Not quite back yet, but that was quite interesting. So let's see. Oh, there he is. All right, take two. Let's see if we can do this again. Everybody. Hello.
I'm almost afraid to talk.
That was amazing. I don't think I've ever heard something like that happen before. I've only ever, I know like the infinity screen, but that was this weird audio cycle. I liked it personally.
Okay, good.
Wonderful. So I think kind of what we were saying when we got interrupted somehow was that if you have any questions about how you can use AI or how we use AI, I'm on the marketing end and promotional end. Brad is more on the writing end. And please ask the question and we'll go ahead and address that on this live. So I guess
just make one quick.
Yeah. And thank you to everybody who's liking the live and joining. please invite people, especially those who you know are authors, independent authors or even traditionally published, because there's little tidbits in there for everybody. So I guess, Brad, without, I don't think I'm jumping the gun here, but how have you been incorporating AI, or do you incorporate AI in your work?
Yes, I do. I am. I would lean on the side of pretty heavily. I'm in favor of AI. I do think AI is a useful tool for many people, not just authors, but I'm going to focus primarily on authors. I've used it some in my current work in progress, which is pretty much complete and will be launching on June the 22nd. That's Rainforest Shaman, which is an eco-fantasy for young adults. And I've used it there in a number of ways to improve the descriptive qualities of the book. So I wrote the book entirely, completed the rough draft, had portions of it edited when I discovered, when AI was starting to get hot, so to speak. And I know that as an author who's, again, written over 24 books, that one of the places that I'm not as well versed as I would like to be is in the ability to describe the setting and the characters in depth without meandering for pages and pages on end, which as a reader bugs me. So I asked the AI to help embellish that perceived weakness of mine. And then I went in and edited those portions of it that it added that I liked and deleted those that I didn't like. So for me, that's one of the first ways I've used it. And I find it's like a collaboration. It's really, I call it my ego-free writing partner. That when I say ego-free, I think, and I spend just a moment about that. It's like, there's certain people that they're in your corner and you're in their corner. And they don't allow their egos or their opinions or any of that to kind of get in the way of supporting you. And I don't know about you, but I don't have a whole lot of those. I don't have hundreds of people just around there yelling, "Go, Brad, go, Brad." I've got a certain number of people that are like that. But for me, I use primarily Chat GPT. And because I always have to kind of stop and think that through, that name, I renamed Chat GPT. So when I think about it, it's affectionately known as Geppetto.
I love that.
Gepeto. So if we talk about Geppetto, hopefully you won't be lost when what I'm referring to is Chat GPT. So Geppetto is my ego-free writing partner. And so some of the ways that I've used it in the writing is brainstorming. Brainstorming has been one of the best ways I've used it. As I'm finishing up book one of the Eagle and the Condor trilogy, which was, again, Rainforest Shaman, I realized there was going to be a book two and a book three. And I pretty much knew where we were going to end up on book one. So I started brainstorming with Geppetto, well, what could be in book two? And while we're at it, hey, let's go ahead and start, brainstorming what could be in book three that would have the cohesiveness, of the trilogy that I wanted. Now, I'll be honest, I've written a number of series through the years, probably at least 3 or 4 different series, but none of them necessarily started out as a series.
Yeah.
This one is the first. So you wanted to say something or comment about that?
No. Go for it.
Okay. So with this one, I knew I wanted it to be a series, and at least for now, it's the trilogy. I might get at the end of book 3 and realize There was a whole nother world out there to explore in book 4, 5, and 6, but right now it's a trilogy. And so actually having the opportunity with Geppetto, ChatGPT, to brainstorm what could be in book 2 and book 3 has really enthused me about not only completing and getting book 1 out there, but moving on to, to the next book, in the series as well.
That's really cool. So I just because I have not, I've never thought about writing a series before. So sometimes when you sit down to write a book, you're not necessarily planning multiple books. This is the first time that's happened?
Yes. Yes.
That's really cool. I always think when people sat down to write a series that was sort of a premeditated piece.
Probably most of them are that way. Who knows? For example, I have a series called the Cosmic Conspiracies series, and I've got 2 books in that series and a 3rd book coming out. But it actually started as a short story. It was a short story. I had this idea. I wanted to write a short story. I wrote the short story, and it didn't have an ending. And I couldn't figure out a good, legitimate ending for the short story. I bounced it off with some of my writing friends, and one of them said, well, maybe the reason you can't come up with a good ending for the short story is because it was meant to be a novel. Oh, I like that idea.
As you go.
So that was before Geppetto was in my life. This was an actual real person came up with that idea. And so I wrote it. And again, by the end of it, I realized that the story, there was much more I wanted to explore in that particular world with Bobby and his mom and everybody that's, in the story itself. So at that point I said, yeah, this can be a trilogy. Because I like reading trilogies, and I probably lean a little bit more towards trilogy over writing big long series. My longest series I think has 6 books in it.
Oh wow.
But again, we don't need to go there, but I basically took 2 separate books that were evolving into a series, into 2 trilogies, and decided to merge them together into one long series, which was a great idea at the time, which afterwards was like, I'll never try that again. It worked. I'm very thrilled with how it came out, but initially it was a lot of work. So again, those were some of the things pre artificial intelligence. So brainstorming is a big one, and we can kind of go back and forth. Because again, a good bit of what I've done in the writing vein is in the marketing, and that's kind of your area of expertise. So why don't you share some of the ways that you've used it in the supporting your authors in the marketing aspect of it?
Definitely. I mean, I would say that one of the biggest things that I've really enjoyed with it is how you can use it to plan out your marketing campaign. And it sounds like you actually have been using it in the same way. But it's like, especially honing into social media marketing, because one of the things I think a lot of particularly authors do is think that they have to promote just the book. And so much of the author journey is in the word, the author journey, and that, followers and readers don't necessarily only want to hear promotion about the book. They want to hear promotion about everything, what the author's doing, who they are, what their inspiration is. And what I like about being able to collaborate with ChatGPT specifically is that it helps you figure out what you want to, kind of how to plan your social media calendar to kind of avoid falling into that realm of only talking about the book. Because one of the things I tried to really talk with authors about in the very beginning, a lot of people want to I ask them, well, do you want to, is this book a series or is it just one book? And if it's one book, I usually try to steer people further away from creating a social media page specifically designated for that book, because it's a finite amount of material. Whereas going with an author name or a series name, depending on how you want to, you kind of got to be careful there, because again, it's still finite. But doing an author name, it opens it up. And so I think that one way that authors can really use AI, ChatGPT specifically, is to figure out ways to highlight their own author journey within their social media. And I found I'm doing this right now with Light of the Moon Inc. is pinpointing we have like 7 months left, almost 6 now, so 6 months left, and figuring out what I want to talk about each month. So it's only 6 more topics for the rest of the year. And then from there, making subtopics once a week. And then from there, generating, email newsletters, blog posts, social media posts, and so on. And I think that that's one of the most brilliant. I mean, granted, I'm in marketing, but I think that is one of the most brilliant things that that AI has been able to offer, is just sort of taking out the mundaneness of it and being able to give you these new and inspirational ideas on how to repurpose content and how to make new stories out of what you've already posted. So that's my favorite one.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
But I mean, one of the ways I noticed, I'm, as I said, getting ready to launch Rainforest Shaman on June 22nd. The reason I picked that date is because it's the World Rainforest Day, which just seemed to be a fit because the whole book takes place in the rainforest. And I was noticing I was getting overwhelmed by everything that I had to do between that date and a few weeks ago. How can I get it all done in the next 30, 45 days?
Right.
And at some point I realized, wait a minute, the launch date is the launch date, and I want to bring attention to the book. And typically, I think I had read somewhere, and it resonated with me, that the 90 days after the book launch is also a critically important time. So I was like, oh, wait a minute. So if you get 30 days prior to the book launch and 90 days after, okay, well, what if I developed a 120-day plan rather than just a very targeted 30-day launch plan? Right. So again, I went to Geppetto and said, please do that. And let me see, I think I have.
I actually want to jump in on what you just said, because I think that one of the things that traditional publishing did was make the idea that you have that launch date and everything leads up to that launch date, and there's so much pressure and anticipation going to the launch date. When in independent publishing, arguably that date is important. You use it for marketing, you use it for hype, but there's still so much that you can do afterwards, because I think it's the New York Times bestseller list and some of those other big, the Amazon bestseller list. You have to sell a pretty insane amount of copies within the first 72 hours to make it. So unless that's your goal, really, I think that the long-term marketing approach is so much more valuable, especially for indie authors, because you're building your following base, and that's your focus, not your, book sales come with that. But if you shift the focus from book sales on launch day to building your followers and your fan base and your reader base, I think that you see a lot more success over time.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I think we can kind of get into a bit here is what you ask for is important, and how you ask. So again, on TikTok, there a couple of people have shared about some of the prompts. In fact, you posted a really great, with 4 or 5 different prompts that you found to be highly effective. Right. Yeah. And one of the ones I came across was the start was act as though, fill in the blank. So I had, again, Geppetto, act as though you're a very successful public relations and marketing expert, and who specializes in working with indie authors like myself, and provide me with a detailed 120-day plan that incorporates the first 30 days prior to the book launch and the 90 days after the book launch. and provide me with it in detail and in the order in which I should be concentrating on that. So again, rather than just dumping a whole bunch of stuff and again giving me the sense of I have to do it all at once, it's okay. Week 1, do this. Week 2, do this. Week 3, do this. Week 4, and it went through each week of what I should be doing prior to the book launch and after the book launch itself. And so I now have a roadmap as to what what I'll be doing, each week for the next, again, almost 120 days. I love it.
That is amazing because it does just take so much mystery out of it. And I mean, even with like newsletters and blog posts, I mean, as authors and writers, you enjoy writing. So blog posts make sense to incorporate. But there are times when there's that added pressure. It's not necessarily passion writing as much as it is lack of a better term, like mandatory writing. You're kind of, it's like reading for fun versus reading for school, right? One you have to do because, you need to get the good grade and keep going. And the other one you do for pleasure. And I think a lot of times when you talk about writing with marketing, so press releases, blog posts, email newsletters, any of those kinds of things, it can get so draining when you put that pressure on yourself. And I have found that, just even working with ChatGPT to develop the content outline, it just helps, be able to take all of the, you can put in SEO and all those other pieces, make your blog post really searchable and, and relevant, and it'll give you new ideas of what to put in there, but you can still add in your own twist. It's almost like building the skeleton, but then you flesh it out. And I think that's the best way to work with it. In terms of, being ethical, I think that branches into a whole other section of the conversation. But I do think that, using ChatGPT or whatever AI base that, your preference is, and then fleshing out from there is really important so that it still does have that human touch to it.
Yeah, exactly. So again, going back to the brainstorming for a moment, when I wanted to do the brainstorming with book 2 of the Eagle and the Condor series, I gave it a prompt. Kind of, again, I filled in fairly briefly. I gave it a synopsis of book 1. Actually, I gave it a synopsis that it had given to me. I kind of put in, okay, here's the key elements of the storyline. Now give me a synopsis, because I knew I wanted a synopsis going forward. And so I gave it a synopsis and then a book blurb description so that it had the essentials around what was in book 1. I said, now let's look and see what could be in book 2 and 3. But start with, let's focusing on book 2. And I said, give me 3 different story ideas, directions that book 2 could go in. And give it in a fair amount of detail, And it did. And all 3 were, wow, man, I don't know that I would have thought of that one. Man, I don't know that I would have thought of that one. So then, again, this is the spirit of collaboration. I said, great. I'm very positive. Back to Geppetto, because I figured, if I respond well to positive, comments, Geppetto might as well. So I said, okay, great. I like all 3 of them. Now let's just brainstorm a little further. What if we took all 3 of those ideas and somehow incorporated them into the book? What would that look like?
Yeah.
So now we're taking ideas from 3 different places that I'm not sure I would have come up with, any of them are not in quite the same way. And now Geppetto is blending those 3 into a much more comprehensive and intricate story than what any one of those by themselves would have been.
That's amazing.
I'm now in the process of saying I work with the 7-point story structure. It's fairly common. You can also think of it as the hero's journey structure, very similar. So I said, okay, in book one, considering that we're going to incorporate these 3 different ideas into one idea, let's start looking at what the 7-point story structure would look like. So now that's starting to provide me with a skeleton for what could be in the book itself. And then my job becomes, using some portions of that skeleton. Some portions I might say, no, I don't like that. And I might go back to Geppetto and ask for, more input on it. But ultimately, it's going to come down to me writing the story. And then once it's written, going back to Geppetto and, maybe flushing out parts of it or whatever. But that's where the collaboration between AI and human being, I think, works well together.
Yes. Have you, in that post that I made with the 5 prompts, one of the prompts was the critic approach, where you ask ChatGPT to essentially act as a literary critic, and you feed them an excerpt, and then you basically get the feedback from them as if they were, a literary critic. Have you done that before?
I have not done that yet. I just ran across that about 2 or 3 days ago, and I had some personal issues that took me off TikTok for about a week. But I love that idea. I think one of the things I would like to see more of is there's a limitation right now as to how much of an excerpt you can feed into it.
I have not
and that may be, again, that may be evolving.
You've hit the limit.
Pardon me?
You've hit the length.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't done that.
Oh yeah.
I'm not giving
times.
chapters though, so.
Yeah. When I was doing the chapters, and I write fairly short chapters. I like books that have short chapters. It gives me a sense of accomplishing something as I'm reading. So I tend to write that way. But even then, if I was trying to embellish this chapter, it usually I'd have to break it up into 2 or 3 parts to get the feedback that I wanted. But again, I think you could take. It'll be interesting to see if I could take a whole chapter like the opening like prologue or the opening hook chapter, and get a critique on that. So I'll definitely do that between now and our next live luncheon.
I'm curious to see how it works when it comes to like story structure, because for me, I've used it with. I've used it in my own writing, but again, more technical writing. And so I'll ask, I'll feed it let's say it's an email response or something, and I'll just say, I'm, wanting to convey this tone. Are there any tweaks you'd recommend? That kind of thing, keeping it very casual. And it typically, it'll spit out like a 1 sentence, just revision, say, oh, maybe take it in this direction instead. Which I really like. It's very valuable because it saves, I double check a lot of things. So it saves me from then emailing my business partner and saying, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And they're able, ChatGPT can typically sort of, just save that amount of time and energy, which is nice. Yeah. I think there's a slight delay on my end.
I want to pause a second. Yes, I was going to say the same thing. Periodically, we're getting a slight delay. So, if you're joining us here, please take that into account. It's a technical issue beyond our control. And we'd like to remind you that if you have a specific or even general question about, AI and how to use it, as a writer and author, please post it below and we'll be happy to answer them. And if you happen to be seeing this by video later, you can also go to either one of our profile pages and click on the link and find out a way to kind of track it down to where you can post questions for a future live event as well.
We have an ongoing Google form that you can submit questions to,
Yeah.
or another way would be to follow us and then send a message, because we can always address it that way as well.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah,
So
I
I
know
think
what
you were
a.
mentioning about emails.
Mhm.
Did you were mentioning you it frozen at my end, so you were talking about emails?
Email newsletters, yeah. Or wait, depending. I talked about emails twice already. So email newsletters in terms of marketing, or emails in terms of me responding to somebody and wanting to make sure I'm
Yeah.
conveying the right tone.
Yeah, that's the one that I've used. I have used it some in my email newsletter, um, but also the one that I wanted to spend a couple minutes about was those emails that you need to respond to, and you know what you want to say, but you're not quite sure how to say what you want to say in a way that it'll land in a positive way over there.
Hmm.
So have you used it any of the AIs in that way?
Yes.
Dare to give any specifics without giving away names?
Oh, no, I've used it in both positive and negative, experiences, whether it's an email that I don't know how to respond to because I want to remain professional and diplomatic, or if it's an email that I've received, where, it could even just be something as simple as wanting to, like you said, get the point across. Specifically, sometimes those short form emails are really hard for me to, like taking a long form text and condensing it into one paragraph, because we all know that when we get a multi-paragraph email, we're unless there's bold somewhere, it's very hard to like keep reading it. I notice people's attention span just doesn't stick. So I've used it for that as well, where I've taken like a long piece and asked it to condense it down and really kind of only take out or bullet point my text, and that's been very helpful as well.
Yeah.
And so, but to answer your question, I have done it where I've asked it, whether it's, I think I shared with you earlier, just if it, there was an email I got where it gave me a bit of anxiety to respond. And so I just took the email and plugged it into ChatGPT and said, I would like your advice on and direction on how to respond to this. And what I've noticed is that with ChatGPT 4, it's so much more articulate, because it starts to map it out, and it'll actually sit there and say, okay, well, no, first let's look at what this is saying, and second, let's make sure that we get your point across with clarity and professionalism. And then it lays out the email, and then it says you can feel free to flesh it out or do whatever you want to do. It's so much more instructional, and you can kind of see the thinking process behind it. Whereas I don't know if you've had similar experience, but ChatGPT 3, while it seemed like such an amazing, like such an intelligence, such an amazing, I don't know what you call it, software, intelligence. It's now that I've been using 4, 3 is just, it doesn't even add up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, for those of you who are listening, the distinction is you can use 3 for free, and to
Yeah.
use 4, it's a membership, a monthly membership of, I think it's $20, which the many different ways that I've used it, that's a bargain. I just can't imagine not using it. It really has gotten to that point. It's that integral to both my professional life and some in my personal life. So, like professionally around emails, I have a relationship that I value deeply with a audio narrator, and we've kind of parted ways. And there's some things in the professional relationship that was incomplete on my part. And he reached out to me recently and said, I kind of, our friendship, not only we have a professional relationship, but we became good friends, and this is kind of in the way. So I wanted to respond to that. And again, it was kind of a touchy situation. And so I went to ChatGPT and asked it to, give it some of the background, and said, how do I answer this in a cordial, friendly, and professional manner? and it
Yeah.
gave me the thing. And then from there, I could edit that and use what I thought worked and what didn't, and send it off. And in the process of this whole using it, I find I'm better. I'm a better human being for it. Let me put it that way. I'm much more conscious of what I want to say, what I want to write, and more diplomatic from the get-go, even before I get the collaboration, energy from Geppetto itself.
Right.
Even in my language and in my casual conversations with my wife, I start looking like it's almost like in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, how would Geppetto say this?
Did you see the South Park episode about ChatGPT?
No, I
Uh,
haven't.
I watched it with my partner, and it was he and I were watching it because they basically use it, but the characters are using it to text love messages to one another. Um, so it's like the boyfriends are using it to text the girlfriends all the sappy stuff that the girlfriends are eating up, and the boyfriends don't even know what they're saying. And he looks at me and he's like, "Don't ever text me with ChatGPT." He's like, "I want your authentic sweet messages." Which was pretty funny.
I can get that.
Yeah.
I can get that.
And actually you
Well,
said something. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No,
Well,
go
you said
ahead.
something earlier about the fact that like how I don't remember exactly what you said, but addressing AI. And I do think I know you and I have spoken about this before, but I think it's worth mentioning that I've noticed that when I speak to ChatGPT with appreciation, not only I don't know how much it's programmed to receive that on on an emotional level. However, I noticed that it changes the way that I treat it and the way that I come at it with a conversation. So I tell a lot of people to think of ChatGPT and use it like a text message stream, like you're texting somebody, it's a conversation piece, or it's a conversation. And so I think within that, if you spend an entire conversation with somebody demanding, you have a very different collaboration than when you spend the time conversing and appreciating and that give and take that happens naturally with people.
Yeah.
And so I think that how you address ChatGPT, while it might not be programmed to change its response, I find that it changes the way that I use it. I use it much more. It's much more valuable to me when I go at it like on a friend level than just a tool, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it does. Again, for me, it's the whole relating to it. Yes, it's artificial intelligence. Gotcha. And that doesn't mean you can't be civil to it. And if when I I've used it enough now that I really think of it as a collaborative effort of having a ego free writing partner. That's where I use it most of the time. But there are times that I use it in a personal way. I might use it again. I was diagnosed with cancer about 2 years ago, and I have chosen to go an alternative path, not the standard of care direction. And so I'm working with a healthcare company here in the United States, and that company is getting a lot of kickback at the federal level about what they're doing and how they're doing and are they allowed to do it and all that, which makes it really challenging for them, I'm sure. And they haven't really been delivering fully the agreement that we established in working together over this next year. So I wanted to write an email to acknowledge that I understand how difficult it can be operating in the way that they're operating, and at the same time, as one of their patients, one of their clients, I have certain things that we've agreed to that you're not delivering on. So how do you write that email? And that's where, Geppetto came in and wrote what I thought was a great, email about it. And then I sent it to my wife first. I said, and she knows my growing intimate relationship with Geppetto. And she wrote back, she said, I think it's a perfect letter. Send it just as it is. So that's a way of using it in a way that's not directly writing related, but can still be very useful in the world of so much of our correspondence and communication, out in the world these days is through text or emails or something of that form.
Well, and arguably it can clear the path. Like, I don't know about you, but if I am sitting down to do something, especially creatively driven, if I have something looming over me, whether it's an email or an upcoming meeting or an interaction that I had, it sort of sometimes can stifle that creativity. And so if you're able to, especially in an email sense, if you're able to take the response, take the email, respond to it, get that out of the way, I can see that clear up a lot of, clear up the space to allow you to have more of a creative flow. So in some ways it can really, I think that one of the beautiful things about AI and ChatGPT specifically is that it can clear out so much of the stuff we don't want to do on a daily basis, and then allow it to give us that time and energy and mental space to creatively continue to, build our endeavors.
Yeah, very good. So it probably won't surprise you that in preparation for our live event today, I went to Geppetto ChatGPT and I asked it to act as though you're an experienced writer and purpose coach who supports indie authors on their writing and publishing journeys, who also uses artificial intelligence like ChatGPT. Give me a list of the top 10 ways writers and authors can use artificial intelligence in their writing careers. Give me a short description along with 1 or 2 examples.
That's a beautiful prompt, by the way. That's a fantastic prompt.
So I have a top 10 list. And here's what I love about this. I love a lot about it. One is I got new ideas that I didn't have before. I had affirmations that some of the ideas that I'd come up with were definitely on the top 10. But what I also love about it is when it's giving examples, it's giving examples of other AI other than ChatGPT. Yeah. That's ego-free.
Yeah.
So I won't read the whole thing, but I'll kind of go through the top 10 and then if we want to focus on any one. So idea generation, we talked about that, brainstorming as I call it.
Yeah.
Say, for example, OpenAI GP3 can generate a list of potential story ideas based on a few input prompts. Second one was grammar and spell checking. So again, if you think you're not using AI, but you use Grammarly, you're using AI. You are. And the example it gives is Grammarly. Style and tone analysis. Now, that one's new to me. It's like, I hadn't thought about that. That's kind of getting into the critiquing. AI can analyze a piece of writing to provide feedback on the style and tone, helping authors ensure they're consistent and fitting their intended audience. Hemingway Editor, for example, can help simplify complex sentences and make prose more direct. So again, a whole different, AI.
You can, and I'll actually jump in there. One of the other things that I've seen, and this goes more into story building and writing, is that you can take a popular author or someone that you really admire, someone that's in the genre that you write who's well known. It's like, let's just say Stephen King, for example, if you're into the horror and books. But you can ask it to write in his tone, or to take similar metaphors and themes from his books and give you ideas on how you can implement them into your own writing. And I do think that, again, kind of is a way to branch into the conversation about ethical ethical writing. But I do think it's important when you're looking at advancing your craft, because you're able to start to look at the tone. Hemingway's been a big example I've seen used a lot, where you can start to implement what people who have already established themselves as experts start to use some of, and find the little things that they do that makes them an expert, and bring it into your own writing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I've got another book I won't go into in a lot of depth, but it'll be a book about a dear animal friend of mine, and I was asking, Chat GPT to give me some of the common tropes and themes that you will find in books about dearly beloved pets and the like. So it came again with a list, most of which I had recognized, but again, to see it outlined that way and succinctly, and then kind of saying, okay, I really would like to include this particular trope, this particular theme, and this one, and kind of, again, to me, that's just smart use of because again, a lot of my books are about animals and include animals, but not in this will be a much more personal, could be almost like a memoir, that I'm not not as familiar with writing in itself. So a couple more.
Sure.
Plagiarism detection. AI tools like Turnitin, Turnitin, which is one I'm not familiar with, can check an author's work against a large database of content to identify potential plagiarism issues. So again, plagiarism is one of the big ethical questions. And now here's AI that can actually help solve that ethical dilemma.
That's amazing.
Pretty cool. Automated proofreading. Again, the example they gave for automatic proofreading is Pro Writing Aid, which I've used both Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid. And again, they're very useful tools. And I think for the most part, people really don't have an issue with, using Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid. Maybe not even recognizing that is a form of artificial intelligence that's not as broad or comprehensive as things like ChatGPT, but still AI.
Well, so what's interesting there, I'm having a flashback to when I was in college. My grandmother she's an English teacher and was very, really taught me how to use my grammar correctly, especially in the written form. And one of the things that I used to do, and I mean, bless her, she would sit there with me. We lived very close by. I'd go and visit her once a week, and we'd sit down with lunch, and she would read my essay that I've written out loud. And so I got to sit there with her and hear what my essay sounded like out loud. And she'd sit there and correct. And I would go in as we were working together and correct. And there were moments when I'd make an argument, like, no, I want it to sound like this, or how is this not correct? As a result, I learned so much about my own writing style, how to correct it on my own, that it was invaluable. It was amazing. Now, I think that softwares like Grammarly, I think people can see similarly. No, none of my college professors would have looked at what I was doing with my grandma and said, "Oh, that's cheating." But I wasn't having her write it for me. but
Right.
she was teaching me how to do it. And I think that one really important thing to note with what you just said is that at no point in this entire conversation, are we wanting to kind of give the idea that proofreaders or editors or are not necessary anymore. Because even though not ChatGPT necessarily, but AI can work as a proofreader, I think that the benefit that an author would get from it is more of that self work, kind of like the way I did with my grandma, where you learn what your mistakes are, you learn how to implement them, but still going to a proofreader and still having that final like look over, because a proofreader checks so much more than just punctuation and grammar. They're looking at everything in the book that AI really can't.
Yeah.
But I wanted
Yeah.
just to bookmark that because I think that that's a really valuable thing for people.
Yeah. So I think we talked about automatic proofreading,
Yes.
content optimization. And again, this is where AI can analyze text for SEO. I think you mentioned about, SEO, search engine optimization to help authors optimize their online content for better visibility. That's not an area that I've had much focus on, and that could certainly be very useful. What's the point of writing and putting out there if nobody ever finds it?
Well, and
So,
especially you can use that like with blog posts, like I said, you can ask it to do a whole SEO breakdown for you. So if anybody uses WordPress or Wix or any of these blogging sites, a lot of times they want to have a description, they want to have a title, they want to have keywords. You don't have to, but it helps. And so one of the things that's really nice with ChatGPT is you can, let's say you wrote the blog post, you didn't collaborate with them. You can then take that blog post, put it into ChatGPT, and ask for it to help you with SEO. And so it might recommend where you could add some keywords in, it might tweak the title a little bit, it might give you the meta description that you need, all those kinds of things. And that's really beneficial, and just it's such a time saver. And again, if you're really loving the writing portion of it and not really the marketing or the SEO part of it, it really helps alleviate some of that stress by quite a bit. And then when it comes to social media, you can use it as well with content optimization, because that's when I was saying, you can kind of take your breakdown and figure out what you're going to focus on and make it very direct. You can also ask it, especially if you use GPT-4 and have it connect to the internet, you can ask it for relevant hashtags. You can ask it to do even what is it called, a competitor analysis, where you can say like, I wanted you to analyze like the other people in this genre and what they're doing and how they're using it. Those kinds of things can be really beneficial too. So I would say that finding creative ways to use it for the technical side of marketing is really beneficial.
yeah. Well, that kind of goes into this eighth one here, audience analysis.
Yeah.
AI can analyze readers' data to help authors understand their audience better. This can include demographics, preferences, reading habits, and more. Tools like Google Analytics can provide valuable insights. So I'm, again, not that familiar with that area, but it seems like that would be another area of dealing with the technical aspects of how to get to know your readers better. Go ahead.
Yes. I was going to say if authors have like a strong website presence and a strong Google presence, then Google Analytics would be able to help with that, especially just figuring out, like, let's say that you had a store connected, you could figure out where people are buying your product mostly. And that's if they're getting it directly from you. Amazon will give its own breakdown of that. But again, that's another place to note that Google Analytics has been around much longer than we've been talking about AI. And that's another place where it's another tool that technically is AI that we use on a daily basis without question.
Yeah, yeah. We're about to run out of time. Let me just add this one because this is one that I have used. Text to speech conversion. AI can convert written content into audio, open up a new medium for authors. And the tool that they're mentioning this for is Amazon Polly, which I've actually used. recently. So again, when people pre-order my book, Rainforest Shaman, there's two things that they will receive, kind of bonus, pre-ordered gifts. One is a Rainforest Shaman character dossier, which has all the major characters, the images of the major characters created by Midjourney, with my approval. I didn't take just the very first one. I put in a particular description of the characters and got what I thought, yeah, that's her all right, that's him all right. And then also a description of the characters, so you can refer back to that. And also a audio, as I call it, a AI assisted audio of the book, because I love reading immersively, which is a combination of reading the book, physical book or ebook in front of me, while listening to the same thing. Much more immersive, much more enjoyable, much more comprehensive, retaining. And so I wanted to provide that. And I will eventually do a human audio book. But in the meantime, I can prevent and make that available to the pre-order people itself.
Nice.
Yeah. So we should talk very briefly, because we're about to run out of the hour time. What's next?
Yeah. So I believe that we set, of course, my computer, I told you my computer's up there. We set it for the 28th, correct?
Yes.
June 28th, and we'll say right now we'll do it at noon again, Eastern time, and that one we're going to be diving more so into the conversation about, supporting independent authors. I'm going to be going more in depth about what empowered publishing means to Light of the Moon Inc. Brad, do you have anything to tack on to that?
Well, yeah, and I'll be going into a little bit more details about what type of support and guidance can I provide as a Write on Purpose coach, and what the collaboration that we're actually in the process of creating here. How can you, again, as aspiring authors or new authors who want to have that guidance. One of the things that we've been talking about a bit on this is, if you're an indie publisher of a traditional publisher of the past, one of the things that you had in most cases was in many cases, was a literary agent. And a literary agent provides something beyond just connecting you to the publisher. They're there as a support and guidance and all that. And so we're kind of thinking that we might be able to provide a certain amount of that in a different way here in this new 21st century for indie authors as well. So that's what we'll be exploring.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. That one will be fun to do as well.
Yeah, and it could change. We got 30 days. Something else might hit the airways that we think would be even more supportive. But that's what we're planning right now.
Exactly. Well, wonderful. Brad, this has been lovely, and I can't wait to do our next one.
Me too.
Awesome. And for anybody, if you have ongoing questions, it doesn't look like anybody answered or asked anything inside this feed, but if anyone's watching this as a recording, just please reach out with any questions you have. By that point, I'm sure everything will be, there'll be new stuff to answer with. So, fantastic.
Bye.
Bye.